Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military of a Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 22nd of October of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about massive missile and drone attack that took place during the previous night between the 21st and the 22nd of October of 2025. According to information we have, yesterday in the evening, the Ukrainians attacked the territory of the city by the name of Bryansk. And later, the pro-Ukraine resources reported that Ukrainians used cruise missiles, and as a result of that attack, the Ukrainians managed to damage or even to destroy the chemical plant of the city of Bryansk, one of the most important and the biggest chemical plants across Ukraine. The Russians were using this chemical plant to produce gunpowder, explosives, and components for rocket fuel. Furthermore, and this is very important, that today, during the 22nd of October of 2025, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation confirmed that during the previous 24 hours, they managed to bring down dozens of drones, and the most important, the Russians confirmed that they managed to destroy and to bring down several cruise missiles. The thing is that the Russians didn't specify what exactly, which type of cruise missiles the Russians managed to bring down. Maybe the Russians destroyed the Flamingo missiles, the missiles that were announced by Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, or indeed the Ukrainians used Storm Shadow missiles of the United Kingdom production. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The Russians managed to bring them down according to the Minister of Defense report, but according to Ukrainian General Staff, the missiles managed to damage the chemical plant. So now everybody is waiting for satellite pictures. Obviously, they will come to us within 1 or 2 days, and then we will understand whether the Ukrainians indeed managed to destroy this chemical plant or not. The Russians strike back immediately, and this morning we got this photo and this picture where we can see the approximate routes of Russian attacks. A lot of explosions took place in Chernihiv, in Kiev, in Sumy, in Poltava, in Dnipro. So as you can see, the entire eastern part of Ukraine was pretty damaged, and the Russians attacked the city of Izmail, which is located in the southwestern part of the Odessa region. The sources are saying that the Russians used cruise missiles, and the thing is that Ukrainians didn't expect that the Russians would attack Ukraine with this, because today the Minister of Defense of Ukraine provided this picture where we can see the effectiveness of work of Ukraine air defense. According to this article, the Russians used 433 air vehicles to attack across Ukraine, and the Ukrainians managed to bring down just 349. So just according to this report, up to 100 missiles and drones hit the targets across Ukraine, dealing significant damage. So I'm trying to tell you that the Ukrainians did not expect this attack as well. So the thing is that usually when Russians attack Ukraine, they use cruise missiles, they use ballistic missiles, and they use drones. And when talking about cruise missiles, first of all, we're talking about cruise missiles of Ha-101 type. And to launch these missiles, the Russians used Tu-160 and Tu-22 as air carriers. But today, the Russians did not use them. And the thing is that when Russians begin preparation for another massive missile and drone strike, usually we know about this, let's say 3 or sometimes even 4 days in advance, because the Russians need to redeploy their Tu-160 and Tu-22 to, let's say, Engels airfield. The Russians need to bring missiles, so everything can be cleared and can be discovered via satellites. So once again, if Russians prepare their attack, usually we know about this in advance. But today, most likely, the Ukrainians did not expect that Russians will attack so hard Ukraine using missiles. The most important, the Russians were using almost only ballistic and cruise missiles, so surface-to-surface missiles. And this is very important, and this type of weapon is almost invisible for Ukraine, because you can't understand when exactly the Russians are going to launch missiles. It is always happens unexpectedly. So that is why the Ukrainians are telling us about so complete and effective work of their air defense. Furthermore, we got several videos published from the city of Kiev, and here we can see the duel between Ukrainian air defense system of Patriot type and Russian missiles and drones, and the author of this video claims that the Russians managed to break through Ukrainian air defense and to destroy the Patriot system that was protecting the city of Kiev. Anyway, it's very difficult to confirm this information. Of course, it's just probably an an opinion of the author of this video, so it's just something that happened today. Anyway, once again, the Russians attacked Ukraine across the entire eastern part. Lots of explosions and lots of attacks were recorded in the eastern part of this Ukraine, in the city of Kharkiv. This video we got today this morning. As you can see, the entire building was completely destroyed as a result of Russian fire. Furthermore, we can see special services that were trying to stabilize the situation. Furthermore, we got report that emergency power outages took place in Kiev and Dnipropetrovsk region during the day. Furthermore, Ukrainian authorities reported that these days we should expect that lots of towns and cities across Ukraine will be without electricity at all if Russians continue their attacks. And this is not the only report about these missiles and drones. Right after the Russians finished this massive missile and drone attack across Ukraine, the Russians began their nuclear test. So this is the report. Key points about scheduled strategic nuclear forces exercises. Putin, along with aerospace forces, took part in the strategic nuclear forces exercise. The exercise tested the readiness of military command and control bodies. The Russians used missiles and the cruise missiles launches were conducted. A Sineva missile was launched from the Bryansk nuclear power ballistic missile submarine in the Barents Sea. Yars missile systems, the Bryansk submarine and two 195 MS long-range aircraft participated in the strategic nuclear forces exercise. All strategic nuclear forces exercise objectives were completed. That was stated by the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin. Furthermore, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation published today this video where we can see how Russians were launching an intercontinental ballistic missile Yars, a carrier of nuclear warheads, over a test range in Kamchatka, which is on the border with the United States of America. Putin personally observed all this. So we see that the situation is very probably difficult. We see that Russia sent a clear message to the Western countries, to Ukraine and to the United States of America that they will try to get everything they want from the special military operation. For example, also right before all these things, all these attacks, all these tests and exercises, the Russians sent a confidential note to the United States of America last weekend. Russia outlined its previous terms for a peace agreement with Ukraine, citing two American officials. In the document known as non-paper, Moscow reiterated its demand to establish control over all Donbas, the agency writes. So as we can see, the Russians will continue following the special military operation tasks and demands, and they will not accept anything from Ukrainian side or from the side of the European Union. Anyway, let's wait and see what is going to be next, but obviously this is a very escalated day, the 22nd of October of 2025. Another important piece of news is coming from the Russian Federation, and this is a very important thing. If you remember, a few days ago we were talking about reserves, that the Russians are planning to mobilize reserves for different purposes. And today, according to information we have, either this law took legal power or is about to take legal power. And according to the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, today they provided us additional details. The Russians are planning to mobilize reservists. The Russians are not saying that this is a mobilization. The Russians are just telling us that they're planning to call for the most patriotic people of Russia and those who are in reserves with the purpose to protect the strategical infrastructure. So this is the statements that were made by Russia. In order to improve the security of vital infrastructure and other facilities vital to the well-being of citizens, a decision has been made to engage the most prepared and patriotic citizens in carrying out measures to protect civilian facilities deep within Russian territory. So if we are using just the simple words, the Russians launched something like a mobilization, but the Russians are not saying that this is a mobilization, and they will mobilize those who are currently located in reserves, maybe those who are veterans of the special military operation already, and these people will protect Russia's oil refineries, energy facilities, railway stations across the Russian Federation. So this is a very interesting interesting piece of news, and most likely the Russians in days, in months, will probably improve this law, and they will involve more and more peoples, more and more layers of their population in this probably situation. By the way, Ukrainians in 2022 started with something similar. First, they announced that they're going to create just a territorial defense forces with the purpose to protect regions where that territorial defense forces was created. But later, these territorial defense forces become probably the most important power along the line of combat contact, and the main purpose of those territorial defense forces was to protect the territories from Russian offensive. And now we see that the Russians are entering something similar. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and first let's talk about the Zaporozhye direction where the Russians continue their offensive operation. If you remember, just yesterday we discussed that the Russians launched a full-scale offensive operation in the direction of the settlement by the name of Mala Takmachka, and as a result of clashes the Russians managed to enter the settlement and to capture or to pass around 50% of the settlement. This video was published by Ukrainian sources where we can see how Ukrainians were attacking Russians with FPV drones, and today we got report, very reliable pro-Russian source reported that the Russians, as a result of clashes, managed to establish complete control over the settlement, and now the Russians are conducting a final cleanup operation. So it means that in coming days the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation can confirm this information, and then we will adjust the map in Russian favor. This is a very important piece of news because from this perspective, from these positions, the Russians can continue offensive operation both in the direction of the city of Orekhov and in the northern direction with the purpose to cut T0814 road between the cities of Orekhov and Gulay-Polya. This is one of the most important logistic roads, and if Russians can cut this road, most likely the Ukrainians will not be able to show resistance on the territory of Gulay-Polya for a very long period of time, because the Russians are advancing in the direction of the city, and during the previous 24 hours, according to information we have, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Pavlovka. This morning, this information was confirmed by the Minister of Defense. They stated that the group of forces East managed to establish complete control over the territory of Pavlovka, and later several pro-Russian sources published this video where we can see how exactly the fightings were taking place for the settlement. In this video we can see how Russians attacked first the logistic of the settlement of Pavlovka, which is located on the Russian side of the river of Yanchul. Later we can see lots of episodes how Russians were attacking and clearing the settlement with FPV drones, and in the final part of this video we can see two episodes how Russians in different parts of the settlement raised their Russian flag. Now, based on the report of the Minister of Defense, based on the video that we've just seen, we have adjusted the map and we have colored these territories under complete Russian control. So currently, by the end of the 22nd of October of 2025, there are just two settlements remain on the Russian side of the river. We're talking about the settlement of Krasnogorsk, but it's just one street village that most likely Ukrainians will not be able to hold for a very long period of time, and the settlement of Privilya, which is located in the northern part of the entire Uspenovka fortified area. And this village is very interesting because there are farms, as you can see, and this village is located on the intersection of roads between Uspenovka and the settlement of Pokrovsk. So this village is very important, and this is exactly where the Russians are heading right now. Most likely in coming days this village would be captured, and then we can say that the settlement of Uspenovka and the rest of Uspenovka fortified area would be caught by Russians in pincers. Now let's move further. Another important update is coming from the Novopavlovka direction. According to information we have, according to pro-Ukraine resources, according to the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, the units of the group of forces center managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Ivanovka, which is located on the Ukrainian side of the river of Volcha. So based on this report, based on the reports published by pro-Ukraine resources, we adjusted the map. The Russians crossed the river of Volcha, the Russians secured the village of Ivanovka, and now Russians have enough of space, enough of towns, constructions, buildings, streets to consolidate additional units and to collect a critical mass before moving further. From the settlement of Ivanovka, the Russians can continue offensive operation in the direction of Novopavlovka. The Russians can attack the same settlement also from the northeast, from the villages of Muravka and Molodetska, and of course in coming days we expect Russians will intensify their activities in the fields. So the village of Novopavlovka, the battle has started, and most likely Ukrainians will not be able to hold their positions in this area for a very long period of time, because the village, the settlement of Novopavlovka was cut by Russians a long time ago. The Russians destroyed logistics and established complete control. Furthermore, the Russians began bombing and attacking the next settlements in this area. In this video we can see how Russians attacked temporary deployment points of the 225th separate assault battalion of the armed forces of Ukraine with artillery and the FAPs. As a result of attack, these deployment points were completely destroyed. Now let's talk about the city of Pokrovsk and the Pokrovsk agglomeration. The situation is worse as never for the armed forces of Ukraine in this area. The thing is that during the previous 24 hours we received two important updates. The first one is coming from the southeastern part of the settlement of Mirnograd. This video was published by pro-Ukrainian sources, and here we can see how Ukrainians were attacking Russians during their attempt to attack the settlement of Mirnograd. All these episodes took place on the outskirts of the settlement along 0544 road. Based on this video, we have adjusted a huge part of the Pokrovsk agglomeration under Russian control, and this update tells us that the Russians are trying to answer the city of Mirnograd. And based on this video, where we can see how a Russian soldier was moving from the west in the eastern direction from the city of Mirnograd in the direction of a vehicle that was abandoned on the outskirts of the city, we believe that the Russians are much deeper inside of the city of Mirnograd, and most likely the entire or almost the entire southeastern part is already being captured by Russia. But once again, this is not the most important update. The most important update was published by very reliable resources, and according to them, Ukrainian army began an important withdrawal from the northern part of Mirnograd. Meanwhile, troops are trying to build time at the southern part. So this is the situation. Today, for the first time since the beginning of the battle for the city of Pokrovsk, for the city of Mirnograd, and for the entire Pokrovsk agglomeration, we start receiving reports that Ukrainians began withdrawal. So now the sources are saying that Ukrainians are trying to retreat from the northern part of Mirnograd, most likely in the northwestern direction, and most likely this is the beginning of the end of the Pokrovsk agglomeration battle. I expected that this battle would continue for another week or something like this, but according to this report we can make a conclusion that most likely in coming days the Russians will capture the entire Pokrovsk agglomeration, and this might happen even during the October of 2025. The battles and the clashes for the agglomeration may not be extended for another month. Most likely in November, just 10 or 5% of the Pokrovsk agglomeration would remain under complete Ukrainian control, and that's it. The situation is very difficult now. The Ukrainians are thinking not about how to save some time, how to win some time. Now they are thinking just about one thing: how not to be caught by Russians. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the area of breakthrough. Today, pro-Ukrainian resources adjusted their maps, showing that Ukrainians continue their counterattacks in the area of breakthrough, and as a result of clashes, the Ukrainians managed to capture some or recapture some territories around Kucherov Yar. As of now, we are not adjusting the map because we have some doubts about the situation. You know that the situation in Pokrovsk is very difficult. Ukrainians are trying to withdraw their positions, but at the same time, we start receiving reports from pro-Ukrainian side that they're counter-attacking at the area of breakthrough. It seems that it looks like a media victory. We decided to wait a bit for additional clarifications about this area, and if we get some, we will adjust the map. But as of now, we believe that we have some doubts. So this is the situation. As for the Kupiansk-Liman direction, during the previous 24 hours, the sources reported that the Russians improved their positions in the area of the village of Stavki. Russians captured the northern part and continue advancing further in the southern direction. As for the Kupiansk direction, during the previous 24 hours, it was reported that the Russians improved their position significantly in the western part of the city. The Ukrainians launched their counter-offensive operation. Now the Ukrainians are tasked just with one thing. Ukrainians are trying to recapture the Yubileyny micro-district. This is the Kupiansk citadel in the western part of the city of Kupiansk. This citadel is located on the entrance to the city, and according to information we have, the Russians captured this territory. The Ukrainians lost the most important strategical position in this area, and now they're trying to find a solution how to recapture this territory, because without this part of the city of Kupiansk, the Ukrainians have no chances for evacuation from the city of Kupiansk itself. So clashes are taking place for this territory, and we see that the Russians are advancing as well in this direction. And that's it for today. Military with Summary channel reminds you we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.